All right, welcome everyone to this webinar. We're Subtle Asian Real Estate. We're a Facebook online community dedicated to educating real estate investors or those who want to become real estate investors to learn how to find their financial freedom. So today we're learning about a new market. I haven't actually explored too much about Tennessee, so I'm really, really excited to learn more. So today we have Clayton Hines and Vince Tomich from Marshall Reddick. Marshall Reddick has over 40 years of experience with real estate, working with investors from single family homes to multifamily and also private money lending. So I'm really glad that I can bring on such a powerful team who's knowledgeable from the beginning to end from our transactions. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor over to Clayton and Vince.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that, Annie. Um, as Annie mentioned, I'm Clayton. I'm with Marshall Reddick. We are based in quite a few different states. Vince is, if you weren't here at the beginning while we were talking, based in California. I'm out here in Tennessee. So I would be your local contact for kind of boots on the ground knowledge and a lot of the stuff we'll run through later on. Annie, do you want me to do the presentation, the slideshow we had, or
Yeah,
are you going to play that in the background for us?
I'll let you do that way you can have the ability to click next. Probably more
Okay,
easy.
so I'll just share screen there.
Oh, and I
One.
forgot to share with folks about my experience with Marshall Reddick. So for me, I work in education and nonprofits in the Bay Area, and real estate was something that was the way method for me to really get into continue living in the Bay Area. And I've worked extensively with the Marshall Reddick team as an investor myself. I've recently purchased property from them and also sold three out of the Texas market. I'm very familiar with their Houston and Dallas staff members and also the California. And so super excited for me to learn more about Tennessee. And they're also my property managers as well, which guys are doing a fantastic job. They are managing some of my single family homes and apartments as well. So that is my personal relationship with them. So really excited
Wow.
to have you guys.
That's awesome. I didn't, yeah, we'll have to connect more on that afterwards. I didn't realize you were so integrated already with all the different aspects we're doing. Vince will hit a little more on some of those things, the property management, the private lending. My main focus is the real estate, but I'm glad you've gotten to kind of experience all of it for yourself a little bit already, since that'll help for any of your clients who are looking to get involved in Tennessee or our other markets that Vince will talk about as well. Um, I'll run through kind of the basics here. Y'all can see me hopefully on the screen share and then here as well. Lived in Tennessee my entire life, was born in Alabama, but moved here before I was a year old. Um, got my real estate license a little, actually, right at 6 years ago now. We were just talking before everybody joined about some of the license renewal classes I'm doing currently to keep everything up to date. So that's always fun. And bought my first home in Franklin, which is one of the communities we're going to talk about a little bit later on, back in 2020. Got married this year in the Philippines back in January. You can see down there. And then my dog Eleanor over here on the side as well, making a little appearance. I'll throw it over, Vince, if you want to do your intro now, and then we'll get into the meat of the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Clayton. Hello, everyone. My name is Vince Tomich, agent and advisor here at Marshall Reddick. I have been with the company now for coming up on 7 years. I primarily focus, my roles are basically primarily focusing on real estate brokerage. So, helping individuals like yourself identify and learn about our various markets, connecting you with the appropriate team members like Clayton, like our property management staff to help, if you decide to move forward with an acquisition and move forward with ongoing maintenance. And I also work hand in hand with our private lending side. So we'll go over a little bit more of what we do on the private lending, but I help our borrowers who are looking for private money loans as well as raise capital for our debt fund for those that might be interested in lending money as opposed to um, buying real estate. And it all started for me. I started as basically an investor myself, found Marshall Reddick through a webinar just like this, and eventually moved into, meeting a lot of the team in Newport, and eventually started working here. And it's been 7 years since. So yeah, excited to be here and excited to share some more information with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Vince. Appreciate all that. We'll continue with a few things that I think are going to be best for you to hit on these next couple slides, given our new friends here on the presentation, kind of the Marshall Reddick overview, and then we'll get into the kind of Tennessee nitty-gritty stuff later on. But I'll
Yeah,
let you have the floor.
cool. So yeah, just for those of you that are new to Marshall Reddick, which I assume most of you are, Marshall Reddick basically has four services that we focus on. So real estate brokerage, as I mentioned, we help people buy and sell, whether it's a primary residence or an investment purchase. We can help with both of those. We also have property management. So 99% of the people that are going to be purchasing an investment property are going to need ongoing management services, and that is something that we offer. So everything from marketing the property, rent collection, rent disbursement, any kind of maintenance or repair requests. Of course, being the local boots on the ground source for knowledge and kind of updating with any kind of rental changes or laws, right? We're responsible in kind of being that intermediary between you and the tenant. As I mentioned, we also are a private money lender. So let me give you guys an example of when I say private money lender. Some of you might be thinking about like the conventional loans that you maybe have had or have engaged with. These are going to be different. Our loans are typically geared for investors only, and it's typically going to be fix and flip projects. So if you want to buy a property, put some renovation money into it, and then sell it or refinance it, we would be a good contact for that financing. Let's say you have an amazing opportunity to get a property at a steep discount and you're going to sell it, relatively shortly after, and you need a bridge loan. That would be another example. Or if, for example, you have a self-directed IRA or solo 401k and you want to buy a property in that, it's something that I did. I have a solo 401k, so it's a retirement account, and I own a property in my retirement account, and you need a non-recourse loan, you need a specific loan. That is another example of a loan that we offer. So those are all loans that we offer. And then on the flip side to that, instead of buying real estate, you can actually lend your money. So like I said, instead of buying real estate and collecting rent checks, you can lend your money and collect mortgage payments, right? So that's a unique, different opportunity that we provide. And you can do that in a direct capacity. So one borrower, one lender. And we also have a debt fund where it's pooled investment, me, you, and 300 other capital partners that lend money across the country. So it really diversifies your risk, and it allows you to really get a consistent high cash flow. We're yielding anywhere from 8 to 9% per year. So that's a little bit more about our debt fund and some of our lending options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great option for cash flow if the right property's not on the table, right at the moment you're ready to purchase. Just talking about some of our different markets here. I'm over in Nashville, just south of it in Franklin. We also have a big presence in Clarksville, Tennessee, which we'll talk about briefly a little later on. And then you can see Florida, Texas, California as well, where Vince is. Anything you wanted to hit on with the different markets, Vince?
No, sir. These are just all the markets that we have a brick and mortar physical, office and property management services. So
Mm-hmm.
Hey, cool. I actually
Exactly.
hit up every single one of your Texas spots then. I
yeah,
know
that's
Wow.
all
awesome.
of, yeah, I know all of your team members and work with them in each of those spots. Yes.
That's
That
amazing.
was that was a serious road trip. It sounds like y'all took the crew around.
That was just about a couple weeks ago. That was last month, actually. You
I'm
guys have
glad
such a
you got
great
to meet
team.
them. We got a fun team out there. Michelle is great. I heard she was quite the host.
Yes, loved her.
Awesome. Well, these are some of the topics we'll cover today. How you should identify a good investment market. For our seasoned investors, you've probably got a good idea of this already, but for some of the people who might be new to it, I think that's going to be a great topic to cover. Of course, some of our Tennessee specific information, what factors we look at that are driving the growth here, what types of properties investors should target in 2026, how you should analyze investment property, we've got an awesome calculator on our website that's really helpful for that we'll talk about a little more later on, and then cash flow versus appreciation, or the perfect marriage of the two. Those are just a few. Of course, if anybody has questions while we're going, put those in the chat. I can't see them right now, but Annie, please stop us at any point if we need to answer them. And then at the end as well, we should have a little time to run through some of those. Okay. This is more of the same, Vince. Anything on here you want to hit, as these are kind of our primary pillars?
Yeah, exactly right. Not we just basic. I like to explain that not every single market across the country is a great market to invest in, and we feel like these are the key criteria that do support those good investment markets. So, of course, population growth being really important. We want to make sure that those folks do have employment. So, job growth important. Economic diversity. We're ideally we don't want to lean on one specific sector of a business. And then, housing affordability is a big one. So for those of you like myself in Southern California, or like Annie in Northern California, ultimately, the prices become a huge roadblock. That's a huge challenge to make investment property work at those price points. So finding properties that are at a more affordable price point is crucial. And then landlord friendly, right? Not to keep picking on California, but that is also a difficulty in California, right? Where the tenants tend to have quite an upper hand, and it sometimes makes managing or a little more difficult, or just more risky, especially for the first timers. And then good infrastructure as far as schools, freeways, and having that ability to expand. So those are all things that we use as metrics to make sure that the markets that we're promoting or that we're setting up offices in have.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll hit on some of these in a little more detail here as we go, kind of the specifics that are relative to Tennessee, starting with employment. This is going to be one of the big driving factors that Vince just mentioned. Obviously, people can't afford to rent the properties you're purchasing if they aren't in jobs that are paying well in the areas that you're targeting. So it's really important to see job growth and steady industry in certain areas. These are some statistics pulled from the Greater Nashville Association of Realtors. They do a lot of analysis on what is making Nashville such a popular city over the years. We don't have all the 2025 info yet, but we'll be able to share some more up-to-date ones down the line as we continue having conversations with you all and they publish additional data. This is comparing Nashville, of course, to some of the cities you might also be considering, like where Annie was recently out in Texas, with Austin, Raleigh, North Carolina, Tampa, and Florida, Charlotte again for a Carolina city, and then Denver, Colorado. Some of your kind of, I would describe them as almost like mid-major cities. We're not talking quite an LA level metropolis, but still large and growing cities. Love seeing Nashville kind of ranked highly in there with job growth. And of course, this is over a decent sample size. If you can see up here, this is a 5-year period from February of 2020 through 2025. So a long enough trend to really be able to kind of put some weight on that. One of the things as a local that I like to really highlight for a lot of people who might not be super familiar with Nashville too is the job diversity in the area. We're known for, some main industries, obviously Music City, right? That whole industry has its kind of hold on the downtown area. But there's a lot of other things going on here as well. We're probably one of the premier healthcare cities throughout the country. We don't even have any of those mentioned on here, but companies like Anthem, the Vanderbilt campus downtown, HCA having corporate headquarters here as well. And then some of the smaller ones that you might not have heard of. Schneider Electric actually does have their regional headquarters here. You've got arms manufacturing with Barrett, pet supplies, office companies, you name it, just a decent diversity. And then some other large ones too that you've probably heard of on the news. We'll talk a little more later on about Oracle. Dave Ramsey's company is pretty large and just opened their headquarters near where In-N-Out is. They just moved their corporate headquarters from California, I think out in Irvine, if memory serves, to Franklin, or just south of it, near where some of the properties we'll talk about later on. But we're seeing a lot of major companies move here, a lot of smaller companies as well, and luckily a diverse range of employers, which is particularly important because if you get too many of your eggs in one basket and that industry suffers, then the whole town will suffer, which we want to avoid for our investors, of course. Anything on this one I missed, Vince, that you want to hit on before we go to our next slide?
No, sir. I think that's perfect.
Awesome. This just goes hand in hand with what we just talked about, right? Employment and low unemployment are kind of two different sides of the same coin. Right here, the graph on the top right is just showing Tennessee versus the United States as a whole. And this is going to be from 2024 through 2025. As you can see, typically we're somewhere between 1% to 0.5% below national averages. And we really almost want to focus on certain areas, right? So in light blue right here, and then below it in this kind of darker blue green is Davidson County, where Nashville is, Williamson County, where Franklin is, which we'll talk about later on. And you've got Montgomery County up here on the border with Kentucky. That's our other primary market within Nashville. All those are well below the national average. You can see some of these more rural counties out here in West Tennessee and kind of center to East Tennessee are dragging the numbers down a little bit, but we like to focus on the areas like Nashville and Davidson County and Williamson County over here that are even, further below those national averages, and just look for areas where it's unlikely that you'll be experiencing lapses in rental income just based on unemployment. So Tennessee's doing well on that front, thankfully. In addition to our unemployment, we also want to see, are people moving to Tennessee? Is the population growing? And of course, what areas similar to that unemployment and employment are the people moving to, or the jobs moving to? Again, looking at our county distribution here, Montgomery, Davidson, Williamson here, basically all of Middle Tennessee are these green counties. That's where everybody's moving to. You are seeing an exodus from some of West Tennessee, and then a slight increase in population here in East Tennessee as well. But the vast, vast majority of this growth, the 18% population growth we're seeing in 2023 through 2024, is all coming into this Middle Tennessee area. So that's why Marshall Reddick is kind of laser focused, not on Tennessee, the state as a whole, but really Middle Tennessee specifically. We want to be where everybody else wants to be. Anything on population else we need to hit on, Vince?
No, sir. I think that's perfect.
Awesome. Looking at appreciation as well. This is going to be really important, of course, for our seasoned investors. You know this, holding a property can be one of the best ways to make money as you hit and sell at those peaks of the market when value is at its highest. And obviously, we want to be cash flowing positively in the interim, but that's where those big paydays often come in for a lot of properties when you go to sell. This is just showing you appreciation for a few of the counties Marshall Reddick primarily targets in Tennessee. Montgomery County, which is going to be where Clarksville is, up on that top left one that we've talked about before. Davidson County, where Nashville is, and then Rutherford County, which is the furthest southern county that we really do business in, kind of southeast of Nashville, a little further away than Franklin. The good news here is you're seeing positive appreciation trends. Clarksville is in Montgomery County, Murfreesboro here is in Rutherford County, and then Nashville is in Davidson County with 7%, 8%, and 9% appreciation here over this 5-year span. So the good thing here is that this accounts for the big boom we saw kind of in that 2021 phase as we came out of COVID, and those interest rates were so low that everybody was buying. So you're getting a larger sample size here that also accounts for the fact that the market hasn't been just absolutely insane like it was in that period over these last few years, with prices still going up year over year. So just shows you're trending in the right direction, and appreciation is a fairly safe bet in Middle Tennessee. This is one of my favorite pictures I like to include on all of our presentations. The Nashville skyline with a 10-year difference. I like to use our favorite, the Batman building here, as kind of your reference point. So you can kind of compare these side by side and just see how many large buildings are coming to Nashville. I know a lot of you probably do live in larger cities than this. So I certainly don't mean to compare our 2024 to some of the other major metropolises across the country, but just to show what a difference 10 years can make, and hopefully what 10 more years will have us looking like down the line. Just some exciting stuff there. Want to talk to about a lot of the things going on in downtown Nashville, specifically Oracle moving their headquarters to Nashville. It's being built alongside and near the new Tennessee Titans Stadium that we just found out will be hosting the Super Bowl, I think in 2030 or 31, if memory serves, and should be opening up later this year or next year. We're all really excited locally for that. And then a lot of other kind of facelifts are going on all around there as far as construction goes. Your Oracle building will be at the far end with the stadium over here. And then throughout, they're going to be adding more high end retail, more high end restaurants, and living spaces as well. So this whole area uh, traditionally has been kind of a little more in need of investment. The Titans Stadium, the old one, was really the only thing there, and when then they got approval with the taxpayers to put some money towards building a new stadium, and Oracle purchasing the land down here for their campus, the city decided to go ahead and also invest more in the surrounding area. So really excited to see the growth. This is all on the edge of East Nashville as well, which for any of you who have visited Nashville, if you want like your high-end, trendy, fun dinner, all those places are going to be out here. This is the place that really kind of has the art scene, the food scene thriving in Nashville, as well as downtown, which has all of your traditional steakhouses, good Southern food as well. So fun area to visit, East Nashville over here for anybody who hasn't been, or if you have been and just want to go somewhere new and haven't really left downtown while you've been visiting, I highly recommend East Nashville as well. Property classes is a big thing in Marshall Reddick. We like to kind of evaluate what we're looking at and help not only set expectations, but just make sure we're making informed decisions about what fits best for an investor based on their particular criteria. Do you want to run through this, Vince?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those of you that are familiar with our website, we have these property classes designated on each one of our properties listed on the website. And it ranges basically anywhere from luxury to pretty much B class. You will see some C class, but you won't see anything in the D class category. And this designation is just kind of a summary of how to set proper expectations. So typically the way I like to describe it is, as you err on the side of luxury and A class property, those are properties in a higher purchase price. They typically are going to yield more appreciation. You usually have a little bit of a higher tenant quality, right? So think of your kind of nicer neighborhoods. But what the trade-off is with that is you're not going to have as much cash flow, and it's going to be, kind of a lower yield. But on the flip side, you can look to your more like, let's say, C and B class properties, where you're usually going to get more cash flow. It'll be a lower purchase price and maybe not as consistent of a tenant quality, right? But those are all kind of setting the expectations of like what you're getting yourself into, because there's plenty of different types of real estate to get into and different expectations, right? And some people are at different stages of life where they feel like, I want to take on as little risk as possible. I need very little. I just want to make sure this asset continues to grow. And then there's people that may want to be more aggressive, right? So this kind of helps with that scale. Now, the two things that are ever so consistent in real estate are going to be maintenance and vacancy. Those are the ongoing variable expenses that come with real estate. So those of you that have been in the business for a while understand that you're going to see that, time after time again. And those that are new to it, I think it's something that is important to talk about, right? So no one can tell you with 100% certainty, what your maintenance and vacancy is going to be at the end of, at the beginning of a year. I'm not going to be able to tell you in 2026 what exactly your maintenance and vacancy will be, but we can really pinpoint this and have a really good estimate based on property class. Another component that specifically Marshall Reddick offers is because of our property management services, we have a ton of data based on neighborhoods, specific builds, and specific communities where we can really get a pulse as to like what the maintenance and vacancy really looks like. But these are all estimates that are factored into our calculators. So when you buy an A-class property, we assume 8% maintenance and 8% vacancy, 8% of the gross monthly rent, that is. And you can see how that scales up as you get into the lower property class. Again, this isn't a certainty. This is just an expectation that we have, or an estimate that we have, that we feel like is important to bake into the calculator.
Yeah, that's important. We'll get into the calculator, I'm sure, in a little more detail. I think y'all will find Marshall Reddick tends to make conservative, relatively, estimates for things. We want to kind of under promise and over deliver. We'd rather give you the worst case scenario and have it end up being a little better. That way, we're all comfortable moving forward as things improve. Um, we'll talk a little bit about now specific communities. One of them we're going to look at here in Franklin, south of Nashville, is almost new construction, just a few years old. And then we'll talk about another one up in Clarksville, Tennessee, that is brand new construction. The benefits across both are going to be much, much lower, maybe not no deferred maintenance, but lower. Brand new, there should be none in theory. And then if a property is only a few years old, you're really not hitting that phase. 6 years plus is where we start to see a lot more of those deferred maintenance costs accruing, where you're in that zone yet. And one of the nice things about the community Avondale we'll talk about in a little bit is that those properties are not being sold as is. So despite being a few years old, you're able to get a lot of repairs done as part of the purchase negotiations. Tenant demand, if you're moving into a new home or a home, right, you're renting, and for $100 more a month, 200, 300, whatever it is, a relatively small amount per month for a lot of people in the markets that we rent in, and you can get a brand new property that has all the same criteria, same bed, same bath, similar square footage, that type of stuff, similar location, to a property that it's a few years older. Most people are going to want that newer property that hasn't been lived in already. So you're going to have a little more tenant demand typically. Supply, obviously, there's always companies building new construction properties. We find that not only do they have a lot of supply that they want to move so they can get on to their next development, but they also typically offer incentives. We'll get into a little more of those here, I think, on the very next slide. Special financing is going to be that major incentive, a forward commitment program that I'll let Vince run us through here a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. So this is actually a really key component to new construction, specifically with a lot of the developers and builders that we're working with. So over the last 4 or so years, right, with the interest rates, of course, climbing from their lows that we saw in 2021, we have been exploring the most effective way to incentivize buyers, because that's been a question from a lot of builders and sellers is, what can we offer to entice buyers to make these acquisitions? And we've played with a lot of numbers, whether it's closing costs, including various components to the home, fridge, blinds, etc. But the one thing that has created the most impact is adjusting the interest rate. That's been our biggest headwind. So having the builders or sellers contribute all of their efforts towards trying to lower that interest rate has really improved the numbers the most, right, from a cash flow standpoint. And that's a lot of where investors are kind of driving their decision. So just to take a quick step back, the reason that I want to take a moment on this slide is because it's really important to understand that what we're able to accomplish here is very unique. If you guys have ever approached a national builder like a Lennar or a KB Homes, you'll notice that they usually have their own financing department, and they're able to offer pretty unbeatable interest rates when you use their own financing department. And it's because they're basically the one that the builder is taking money from their left pocket and putting it into their right pocket, essentially, right? They're saying, okay, if we're going to get this sale if we can just make the financing so attractive, right? So they're pouring a lot of money to buy down these interest rates, and they don't have quite the limitations that a conventional lender would have. Well, being that we don't, we're not part of a larger builder, right? Or we're not a KB Homes or a Lennar. We've been able to kind of mimic that logic for more smaller local builders. And really, there's a crucial kind of element to this, which is on an investment purchase, the max that you can receive from a seller credit from anyone, from a credit from a seller, from a realtor, from anyone in total, is 2% of the list price. You cannot receive more than 2% of the list price on a conventional investment purchase. Okay. So with that said, we have in the past maxed that out, tried to use all of that money to buy down the interest rate, and it really wasn't doing enough. But what Reed and his team, who we work with, have created is what's called a forward commitment. And what that is it's when we reach out to the builder before any transaction has happened, and we ask the builder, if you would like to buy a certain, let's say, a tranche of money and have certain interest rates for your buyers, because it's not tied to any one specific deal and it's done before an escrow is in place, there is no limit of how much money you want to contribute and buy down the interest rate. So that is very unique, because that kind of opportunity is kind of reserved for, like I said, these national builders who are going to pour in millions of dollars to buy these certain tranches of money. Reed has been able to do it for more smaller local builders in much smaller amounts that really create a unique benefit, which is how we're able to get rates from 3.75 to 5.25. And the reason that ranges is because that determines how much the builder wants to contribute. As you can imagine, if they contribute more money, the rate goes lower. As they contribute less money, the rate goes higher, right? They're buying less points. And I think that is a function of, as a control knob of which they can use to determine how much business they want to do, or based on the kind of external market and how it's doing. So that is kind of a longer explanation of the value, but I did want to explain that this is very unique and this isn't something that can just be replicated anywhere. You might see these incentives, but I can assure you, to get to this point, it does take quite a unique system to accomplish this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all great points. It's one of the main reasons why we focus on specific communities and builders that we have relationships with, just because if you go find any listing that's out there and available on the resale market, most of your individual sellers are not comfortable. They either don't know about this, so they're afraid of it, or they don't want to commit this money because they haven't done it before and seen the fruits of their investment play out positively. But it's pretty challenging to convince an individual one-off seller who doesn't really do this as their full-time industry to get with this program. So it takes time to build these builder relationships. We'll talk about a couple of them here moving forward, but this is definitely the big reason why Marshall Reddick's able to succeed in this high interest rate market that we're in right now. We'll run through some cash
Can
flow
you go back?
examples
A
now
quick
on
question
specific.
on back onto
Yeah,
that
please.
loan part is that with the low interest, the interest rates that you guys have, is it really permanent? Like all like the 30-year fix at such this low rate? Or is it just
So
like a first 2 years, something like that?
no, so we have basically two options that you can go for. We have the most aggressive rates that you're going to see are going to be a 10-6 arm. So that means the rate is fixed for 10 years. At year 11, it would adjust every 6 months. So let's say, for example, that rate is 3.75. Maybe for the 30-year fixed version of that, the rate is 4.125 or 4.25, right? I don't have that the exact conversion off the top of my head, but no, this isn't like a teaser rate where it's goes away in 1 to 2 years. This is something that's fixed for typically 10 at the minimum, and then it could be a 30-year fixed option.
Okay. So
Yeah,
that means
that's a
like the
great.
builder is buying it down rather than lowering the price of their property to make it more attractive to make a
That's
move.
correct. So, and
Mhm.
there's a strategy to that. Let me give you just a quick example, not to take too much time on this because you're asking. I want to make sure it's clear. If a builder were to reduce the price of a property, let's say $50,000, maybe that impacts the cash flow $40, right? Because I've lowered the purchase price and I've lowered the down payment or I've lowered the loan amount therefore, and it changes to $40. If you take $50,000 and you apply it towards what a current market interest rate is for an investor, let's say it's like in the 7% range right now for an investment purchase, and you take a 7 and you bring it down to a 3.75, that's going to save you hundreds of dollars, hundreds and
Mhm.
hundreds of dollars. So it's a kind of a win-win for everyone because sure, like you're paying for a property that maybe you could negotiate down lower, but the results of that property you are not going to be able to compete with if you didn't have this kind of financing attached to it.
Mm.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even to quote specific numbers, I was just talking with a client. I'm helping sell some multifamily properties in Clarksville earlier today. Um, and we were looking at the difference of a market rate around 6.5 versus a 4.75. So even 1 point above this, and what it would cost to buy the rate down versus reduce the price the same amount. This is for about a $600,000 property, give or take, and reducing the purchase price by 4% had a relatively minute impact on the cash flow versus right in that range you were talking about, Vince, probably $50 to $75. But if we bought the rate from 6.5 to 4.75, it was a almost $600. It was like $578 difference in cash flow, changing the rate and keeping the purchase price the same. So we really find, for cash flow's sake, that getting that interest rate down as low as possible for a starting point just makes a world of difference. We'll talk about that here as we get into kind of the specific numbers. This is the Avondale Cottages, kind of our premier option right now in Tennessee, built around 2022. So most of these are about 4 years old. Franklin's kind of one of the premier suburbs, similar to like Irvine that you were talking about earlier, Annie. I'm out in California, at least from what I hear when people visit from out there. An area that's been popular for decades and figures to continue in that direction. These properties are really close, about a mile and a half from the downtown area, so locations about as good as it gets. And they come tenant occupied. These are current rentals. They have tenants in them in place already who are paying rent. So one of the great things, in addition to everything else I just mentioned about these, is that from the day you close, you're making cashing rent checks right away. You don't have to wait to find that perfect tenant and deal with upfront vacancy costs. A few things I'll run through here, and then Vince, I'm sure you'll want to hit on a few as well. So I'll give you a little time before we go on to the next slide. This is one of our more expensive properties in the Avondale community here in the low 700s. This is our larger 3-bed, 2.5 bath floor plan. We'll talk about our smallest floor plan here next. But there is a wide range in purchase price in this and size of property in this community. We typically recommend 30% down payments, as that's when your cash flow starts to really look nice. Rent is baked in. Like I said already, there is a locked in tenant in this property. And due to our relationship with the developer, we've gotten them to commit to buying the interest rate down to a 3.75 rate on this property and all the ones in the community. Taxes and insurance, HOA, all of these are 99% accurate. We've helped more than a dozen investors now buy in this community. So we're very dialed in on all these projections here that add up, sorry, to your fixed monthly expenses. Monthly income is going to be your take home according to our calculator after you've paid all these expenses, which is going to be, of course, the main one, your mortgage payment, and then everything else you see on here as well, has you walking away with just shy of $1,000 a month in cash flow. You are going to see those estimates Vince was talking about earlier, your maintenance and vacancy. And then since these are already leased and you have a tenant in place, we don't have that leasing fee baked in there. A really important thing to note with our calculator down here at the bottom is this estimated cash flow in year 15 assumes that your rent doesn't change at all. For any of our seasoned investors, I'm sure you know that rents typically go up a little bit over time. So this, while it is in place right now, I would say is extremely conservative. It's highly unlikely that your rent would not go up to offset the additional maintenance costs that you'd be looking at for a 15-year hold, and then your ROIs down there at the bottom as well. I'm sure you've got a few things after helping a ton of people over there that you want to add to this, Vince, or do you want me to go to the Magnolia floor
Ooh,
plan?
before we
Yeah,
go into this one, can we look at about your numbers? I noticed that you underwrote that the management fee is zero. So is this assuming that we're self-managing this?
that's a great question. So that was one of
Mm,
the things I'm going to add. There's actually a promotion for this property that within the first 12 months, we are going to cover your management fee, right? So
mhm,
this is year one numbers. That's just another incentive that is being offered for this community, is covering year one of property management. So when year two kicks in, we have a monthly management fee of 9%. That'll change this fixed monthly cash flow to right around 550, which is still great. So the two things that I really wanted to point out here, though, is one, what you just brought up, Annie, which was the management fee for the first 12 months for free, but also the fact that it's already tenant occupied. This is already a pre-approved tenant that's paying this rent. This isn't a pro forma. This isn't something that we may get. We have received rent from this person and they have been vetted and they are paying this rent. That is probably the biggest concern across the country right now, is when you're looking at these pro formas, can you achieve that rent? There is no more studies or market analysis that I could provide than someone actually paying it. So this is
mhm,
probably, I'm the most confident about this particular community because I don't have to lean on pro formas or comps. I can just lean on the rent roll and the fact that this person is paying. So that's the two
mhm.
things I wanted to point out. We spent a little more time on this one property, and just for the essence of time, we'll kind of go through the others a little quicker. But just know that, like Clayton was saying, this number at the bottom, your annual ROI, that is an annual average, assuming you hold it for 15 years. On our calculator, if you adjust the hold time, all of these numbers will change. Okay.
Yeah, great point with the tenant in place. In addition to obviously this property being rented already, we've seen really short rental times on ones that are hitting the market. I think over the last couple months, Marshall Reddick is up to 5 leases now, if memory serves, without any of them being on the market for more than 2 weeks before they had a new lease signed. So we've
So
got tenants in place already, and
if
then the
there's a
ones that
tenant
go ahead.
in there, who owns these properties right now then? Were we buying it from another investor?
So right now, the original builder owns these properties and is selling them off individually. At one point, they owned all 40 within the community, and they held it as a for rent exclusive community. They started selling them, I think it was September of 2025. We're a little over halfway, I believe, now through the closings in the low 20s. And there's a mix of owner occupants and investors purchasing those right now. Mhm.
Oh, interesting. I wasn't expecting that they would really come in with tenants for new
Mhm.
builds. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a win-win for everybody, really. As Vince mentioned, we've got a lot of people who are struggling to place tenants in their properties, and just taking that worry off the table, not only for your bottom line, is so important, but also with the rental amounts for these properties and the vetting requirements. I know earlier we talked about high quality tenants. I mean, you're seeing just people who could buy homes in most scenarios and probably just aren't because interest rates are so high on average, renting these homes right now. Really, really high quality tenants compared to a lot of the other properties we're in. across the country and in Tennessee, the ones I'm familiar with. As Vince mentioned, we'll run through these a little bit quicker. So this is another example of a property at Avondale Cottages in Franklin, and then we'll hit on a Clarksville option as well. This is going to be our smallest floor plan. So we gave you kind of the upper end of the price range, and this is going to be the lower end of the price range, a much more approachable initial investment. Again, at that 30% down payment, but a list price at 570 instead of 730. I should mention too, we've got these baked in at zero on the initial repair cost. The seller is not selling these properties as is, so you'll get to do an inspection, you'll get to request repairs, you'll get to have the seller make good on a lot of the items that would come up when your tenants do move out. Some of those potential deferred maintenance costs you could get eaten by them as well on this purchase. To give you a good idea of the rents, even the smallest units are right around $3,000 a month right now, up to that low $4,000 range for our 4-bedroom units, bought down to a 3.75 interest rate again. This one without the management fee, as Vince just mentioned, this is that year one cash flow at $570 a month, and then that would drop down to, if my math is right, around $300 a month once that 9% management fee kicks in, which is still fantastic. Usually those numbers are more akin to what you would see on like a C-class property in Tennessee instead of this, which is A-class, almost on bordering on that luxury range even. So these are a great mix of both appreciation and cash flow relative to what you'll see on a lot of our different properties, which kind of brings us to Clarksville, Tennessee, where the price points are a lot more approachable than they are in Franklin. This is going to be Montgomery County, so you'll see some different taxes. This is a different builder, so we've got a different interest rate buy down negotiated with them. Again, you'll see that 30% down payment that we typically recommend, a 4.75 instead of a 3.75% interest rate, so a little bit higher from this one. Now, this, of course, this builder is not also agreeing to cover that first year of management. So you've got that included right away here. So there's no free management for 1 year in this community. And that has your monthly income right around $250 a month, just a hair under, for an initial investment of a little over $100,000. You will see a lower projected 15-year ROI, a little lower appreciation, of course, with this price point. But this is a brand new property. The builder for this one, Rex Hawkins, Marshall Reddick, has helped investors purchase over 25 of their homes over the last year. It's a very quality product. They do help work with us a little bit to begin placing tenants during the escrow process. You're at least marketing them to place tenants to cut down on investor vacancy. Vince, anything you wanted to hit on in the difference between Franklin and Clarksville? I know you've gotten to visit both in your trips out here.
Yeah, absolutely. So as well as visiting both, I've had multiple clients purchase both in both areas. I've actually had family members purchase in both areas. And what I can say about Clarksville as well is we had an opportunity where we do have a great relationship with this builder. And one of the things that we can offer is if a client does decide to go into contract, we can start marketing the property for rent while in escrow. So that's a good kind of a heads up. So you don't have to start from a dead stop from once you close and once the kind of clock is ticking. We can kind of start searching for a tenant while we're in escrow. So while the builder is still really the owner. Now, we won't actually place that tenant and sign leases and stuff until we know we're going to close, but that could be almost simultaneously, like within a couple days. For example, I've actually had my brother purchase one of these properties. We had an approved tenant essentially before closing. So as soon as he closed, we signed the lease and they moved in within a couple days. So
Wow.
that's something that is very much achievable and something that I've seen time over time again. This one actually says it's tenant occupied, which is great. But for the ones that are not, it's not a concern given that we do have some other benefits there.
That's awesome. I'm glad for your brother when it works out that way. We'll run through So those are kind of our property specific examples. If anybody wants to do a deep dive on these, you can of course connect with myself and Vince, and we can really get into the nitty gritty details. But out of respect for everybody's time, I want to run through kind of the next few slides here quickly. And then if we have any major questions, we can answer those
Yeah,
before we move on. So Vince, I'll
absolutely.
let
So
you take it.
a key part of this process is getting pre-approved with our preferred lender, Reed Hazard. Reed unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. He asked me to stand in. So basically, this is kind of the pre-approval steps. As I mentioned, a lot of this forward commitment or special financing that we've been referring to is all with his company. So it's really easy to get pre-approved. We basically, he has a loan app online, and it's simply including your income statements, W-2s, tax returns, pay stubs, etc., 2 months of bank statements, any mortgage statements you have from your property. And then Reed and his team will put that file together, ask you guys some questions, understand kind of the overall goals of the purchase, and then run you through, underwriting to make sure we're solidly pre-approved. And the builders that we've been working with have been working with Reed for a while. So having that kind of blessing from him and knowing that we're all buttoned up is really just kind of the cleanest path forward, right? And again, it allows you to take advantage of all of the incentives that are being offered. So that's just kind of a quick rundown of what the documentation request may look like for a pre-approval.
Mm-hmm. And this will be important whether you're buying one of those properties we just mentioned or a different one. Any seasoned seller is going to be asking in your offer, are you pre-approved already? Do you have proof of funds? So those are just big steps that'll help you know your purchasing power. Interest rates and where they're heading. I think everybody's well in tune with that. That was going to be a slide Reed hit a little more on. These factors, of course, again, any of our investors are likely well in tune with what's going on, inflation being a little higher than I think all of us would like, unemployment being a little higher than all of us would like, and geopolitical trends that we don't need to get too into, but I think everybody's relatively aware of. Vince, anything you wanted to hit on those before
Yeah,
I move on?
no, these are just kind of the key factors of what's keeping interest rates higher, right? Up into the sevens and sixes for primaries and investments. And ultimately, kind of the strategy we've explained how to get through that. Inflation being a kind of a main problem, the job market being strong, and that's kind of keeping the Fed from cutting rates. And then obviously, the war has been a major headwind. So those are all things that are kind of working against us as investors who are, trying to obtain the best financing. But ultimately, like we've gone over today, there are things that are, that we have that to overcome that, and with hopes with a little bit more time, we could actually see some natural improvements with these rates, in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Minimum down payment for an investment property. I know I mentioned 30% earlier as our typical baseline, but certainly that's not the minimum you can do. I'm sure you've seen people go much lower than that before, Vince. What do you think?
So technically, and I'm just speaking from like technical standpoint, on a single family home, you could put as low as 15% down. No one does that because you have mortgage insurance and the rates are off the charts high, right? I don't even know if it would be priced out at a 15% down. So a lot of times what you're going to hear is 20 to 25% down for a single family. Those 5% increments typically help with mortgage with rates. As the lender kind of views that as a little bit more security, the more skin that the more that you put into the deal. So as Clayton mentioned, our defaults are typically going to be 30% on our calculator, but know that you can put for a single family as low as 20 to 25 is kind of recommended. And then for a multifamily, your minimum is 25 and the, kind of recommended is 30, right? So again, 30 has been just a number that we've seen kind of make the most sense, but we can have those discussions and make those adjustments if you feel like, hey, it's tight. I really want to make this work, but the numbers are a little bit tight, or the down payment funds are a little bit tight. So that's just a kind of a little bit there. And then Clayton, you can go to the next slide, and I can kind of I did touch on this. If you're looking for 2 to 4 units, the minimum down payment is 25. Of course, we're recommending that 30% down. What's the minimum FICO score? This is a question we get asked a lot. Really, there's been some new changes in guidelines where the underwriting systems don't really formally require a certain credit score. I will tell you, It would ideally you want to at least be in that 700 range plus. That's where you're going to probably get the most the best, the better pricing. It's usually in increments of 20. So 720, 740 is a better bump, 760, and ultimately 780 plus is, it kind of is all the same after that. But yeah, so as far as interest, or as far as FICO score, good credit is important to secure the best financing. And then what happens for those individuals that may be on the call that have multiple properties? You're limited to only 10 financed properties. That's the max amount of conventional loans. So anyone that's running into that, or anybody that may not qualify for conventional financing, let me give you a quick example. Somebody who maybe just changed jobs, maybe you're in a new you started your own business, or you just went commission and now you've changed your jobs. Usually you need a 2-year average, and if you don't have that at this moment, you're not going to qualify for 2-year for conventional financing. So what options do we have for you? Next slide, Clayton, if you don't mind. Uh, there will be debt service coverage ratio loans. And what those loans are doing is, instead of focusing on you as the borrower and your income and your assets and your credit, the lender is looking at the property. What can the property produce for income? And what loan to value, how much are they loaning you versus how much the property is worth? Those things become much more important for a debt service coverage ratio loan than it would be for a conventional loan for a specific person. So just know that even if maybe for whatever reason conventional it doesn't fit for you, Reed and his team have been really good about taking the money that builders are providing for incentives and even applying that to DSCR loans, which is short for debt service coverage ratio loans. So just know that there's other resources than just conventional, and Reed's a great guy to have that conversation with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said, Vince. Thanks for running us through all of that here. And you'll all be emailed this, I think, by Annie, everybody who's on here. And of course, we can talk about it in further detail. This just runs through exactly what to expect from our property management team, who can help you out with those Tennessee properties we talked about, as well as in those other markets we are, though. Maybe I'm a little biased. I think our Tennessee property management team is the best. Michelle, who runs that group, is fantastic, and I'm sure you'd all enjoy working with her. You do get discounts as you get into higher unit count buildings, as you can see down there below, but a pretty simple setup there. I don't want to run too much into that since we're a little behind on time. This is Vince's page, his email right here, and phone number if you want to reach out and set up a consultation, either big picture or Tennessee specific, in which he can loop me in as well. This would be the way to do it. I'm sure Annie will get us all connected after this too. Do we want to, I know we're just a few minutes over, do we have any pressing questions we want to hit for the group before we wrap up?
Yep, I do have a couple going back on the PM fees that you had listed, because there was that one that said it was covering the PM fees. So who is actually paying for those? Is it the builders?
So when we have a builder incentive, like for example, in that first community in Franklin, right? We are in that specific scenario. The brokerage is actually covering the property management fees for 12 months. So we are, from our earnings, the commission that we make, we are covering that cost for you. And as far as moving forward, you would be responsible, of course, month 13 and on, you would be responsible for covering those management fees.
And then, so what that brokerage fees is covering, is it only for these new bills, or how does that work?
For that particular offering, yes, that is just for the Avondale community. As an incentive, it's something that we want to. It's a community that we're putting a lot of emphasis on, and it's something that we feel like would help investors kind of get their foot in the door, build some reserves, so that they can kind of feel more comfortable with that purchase. At that price point, we try to make things a little bit more attractive, rather than just simply trying to reduce prices and things like that.
And then, so the PM fees would only work if it's going to, if we do the PM with Marshall Reddick, and not if they had another PM out there.
That is correct. That is correct.
And it's also a separate benefit too, in that the more properties we manage within a certain community or built by the same builder, we really start to learn those properties. Not only, what issues might be common, like if we have one unit and then we see the same problem again in a similar floor plan. Okay, well, now we know for any of our other buyers who have that one, maybe we need to get ahead of this. It lets us know, develop relationships with the HOA management companies, keep abreast of everything going on over there. It's just kind of a win-win, really. We can be more confident in the product that your clients are purchasing, and it makes life easier on our property management team as well. So that's why we're able to offer that incentive, because it helps us out in the long run as well.
And how many units are you guys managing in that community?
Oof, right now in Avondale, is it 13, Vince? Does that sound
There's
right to
40
you?
units. There's 40 units total, and we are managing all of the units that we have sold to investors. There is a fair
Mhm.
amount of primary residence owners as well there, and the remaining that have been unsold are to be determined. If we sell all of them to investors, would be like another 20 that we would manage. But yes, that's about right at that current point.
And
Mhm.
then aside, because I noticed that we only looked at the new builds that were in communities. Do you guys also do like the second-hand homes, like in the like more
Yeah,
south?
of
Okay.
course, you can buy, pre-owned or third party from third party sellers, and we're happy to do that. And it doesn't. We can even help you buy properties that are not on our website. Our website is typically a function of being able to review the numbers uh, using our calculator that's replicated and consistent throughout our website. But if you find a property on Zillow or Redfin that you're interested in and you want us, our feedback or to put it on our website to review the numbers, we're happy to do so. Again, the main reason that we're focusing on the properties that we're focusing on is because we spend a lot of time in this space, and these are the properties where the numbers really work out. Just picking a property that's on the open market
Mhm.
used to be fairly easy a few years ago. That's become harder and harder, and that's kind of the logic behind our recommendations.
Yeah, that was actually the question I was trying to think of is that I'm imagining that the new builds cost more, but that they do have lower interest rates versus, and then I'm trying to think of like what is the pricing on a second-hand home at current rents and current interest rates? How does the cash flow and depreciation work as like, apples to
Well,
apples, if it
well,
can be compared?
believe it or not, the price point for pre-owned homes is not that different than the new builds, right? So
Really?
like it's really not that far off. You have to remember, like, these new builds all have to get appraisals. They all have to look at comps. The comps are not only just looking at new construction, right? They're looking at what's in the area. So
Hmm.
yes, there is oftentimes a bit of a premium, but it's not. It's shockingly not much different than what is being offered in the general community or general comps, even for homes that were built 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, that is
Mm.
interesting.
And it ties back to what we talked about earlier with the interest rate versus the purchase price reduction. I mean, I encourage everybody to go to our site, and you can just click any random property and just play with, like, what does a 5% difference in the purchase price do? And then what does a 2% lower interest rate do? And just look at how only that affects the cash flow. And it's night and day, which one you would want at the end of the day. And it's not impossible to get those interest rates, forward commitments negotiated on the resale market, that secondhand market, but it's much less likely. Like we talked about earlier, it takes a lot of time and relationship building typically to get there, and it's just hard to do that on a one-off basis, with those. Not impossible, like Ben said.
I'm probably guessing that the differences in why like it could be better for the new build would be that we're not spending any money really on the rehabs compared to
Hmm.
buying a secondhand home. And
Hmm.
appreciation, I'm assuming that these are not like inside Nashville proper, right? Kind of on the outskirts, would you say? Or
Correct.
is it
Franklin
Nashville?
is
Okay.
like the premier suburb. It's about 30 minutes south of town. And
Okay.
then Clarksville, that we looked at, is northwest of Nashville, about 45 minutes, kind of its own smaller city with a state university and some large industry. up there as well. There are, I would say, certain countries. I know I worked with an investor in the past, or a group who mostly represented people out of Japan, like Japanese nationals who got a huge tax break for buying 15-year or older properties. Um, Apparently, according to him. So there might be some benefits specific to individuals for older properties that could overcome some of these new construction benefits we've talked about. But I think for the vast majority of us, probably 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, it's going to work out better going with these newer properties for both the benefits, specifically the interest rate, and then also you're not incurring all those deferred maintenance costs like you just mentioned earlier. You've got something where you just get to build up a nice reserve with positive cash flow for 5+ years before all that stuff, all those bills start coming due.
And then also from your experience and appreciation, like I've noticed some of the several other different markets that I've been in is that the appreciation is actually a little bit better in the suburbs compared to the city proper in the downtowns in itself. Would that be a similar situation in where you guys are?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We showed a little graph earlier that showed appreciation trends. I had to exclude Williamson County, which is where Franklin is, on that graph because it like broke the visual appeal of it. The others were all kind of in line, but Williamson County was 13% over that same period. The others were 7, 8, and 9, respectively. So it like crunched the other three so they looked like they were one line and you couldn't really see what was going on. But it
That was
is, yeah,
why you put them on.
it's very popular. We're getting tons of people moving here from all over the country, California, like I mentioned, with In-N-Out moving their headquarters here, New York, Chicago. I do a good bit of residential real estate sales as well for primary residence buyers, and we have a lot of people moving from out of state. And then if you live in Nashville and you want better public schools, you move down to Williamson County. So it's just a very desirable area in general. So you do see higher appreciation in this suburb specifically. The national trend, it's interesting that it's in lockstep with that. I can't speak to all that, but with Williamson County, Franklin specifically, yes, higher appreciation than the metro area.
And I was looking through your underwriting. I actually was surprised that the interest, not the interest rates, but your property taxes are so much lower compared to what I've seen on the
Mm-hmm.
Texas side. So I think that was a really
Yep.
nice draw for me. And that's interesting.
It's massive. And another reason we like Williamson and Montgomery County, Davidson, where Nashville is significantly higher than those other counties.
Yep.
Not quite Texas level, but high by Tennessee standards.
Yeah, property taxes seems pretty much like similar. Not much difference, but it's the insurance was the huge difference that I saw. Like so much cheaper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that is just about everything, unless there's anything else we need to hit on.
Nope, those are all the questions I had. So thank you guys so
Awesome.
much for your time. What I'm going to be doing is if it's okay, can I share the slides with everyone as
Yeah,
well?
of course.
Okay, awesome. So I'll send out the slides and the recording, and we'll connect again soon. Thank you guys so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you, Annie.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Later.
guys.
everybody. Have a
Good
good
evening,
evening,
guys.
Vince.
Good night. Bye.